Here we go. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us again on this Wednesday evening. We're so excited to have you again here for our college journey conversations. We continue this evening talking about selective college admissions and an exciting topic, and I'm sure it's going to reveal a lot of great information. We have my dear friend and colleague from Chicago, Illinois. She is Tina Tranfaglia from the College Knowledge Admissions Consultant out of Chicago. And Tina, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background. Wave to everybody. That's awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tina. I have been a college consultant since 2007. And prior to that, one of my, I guess you call it hobbies, is I worked with the admissions committees with Harvard and with Northwestern, not as an employee, but as an alumna representative. So I did a lot of college interviews. I did a lot of college fairs for them. So I have been in and around the college arena for admissions arena for somewhere near 30 years, but the last 13 as a consultant. Since consulting, I've worked with 500 students. I specialize in helping high achievers get into highly selective universities and colleges. I've worked with students across, I think I counted this the other day, and don't quote me on the number, Mark. I think it's something like 85 different high schools and 30 different states, something like that. Yeah, I was putting together a little brochure, so I counted it, but I might be
all over the place.
Yeah, I do a lot of remote work. I do mostly in-person work in the Chicago area, but you know, it works just as well to work with them remotely. And I really, really like to emphasize with my students how to make their applications the best they can be through all the pieces that can still be changed. So whatever point in time I get them as a student, whether it's as a freshman, a sophomore, or even almost right before senior year, we'll do whatever we can do to make all the remaining pieces that can be changed to be the best that they can be and give them the best chance of getting into their schools. And I also love to help them round out their school lists, because I cannot tell you how many kids have come to me with a top 10 list of schools that highly resembles the US News and World Weekly rankings. So it's really important to have range when you're applying to schools like that.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned one thing that was interesting to me, of course, well, a lot that was interesting, but
yeah,
one
most things I say would be.
one particular thing about that you work primarily remotely. So this whole COVID experience has actually not been something that you've had to worry about in terms of working with students, because your students tend to work remotely anyway with you, right?
Yes, some do, but I have lots. I'm sitting here in my office where I meet with students normally, haven't met with them in months in this office, so we have gone remote. But yeah, I always have probably 20 or 30% of my practice is students who are outside of the commutable area. And so we've always worked remotely. And you know what's kind of strange? Somehow or other, I always get to meet them in person. That is really weird to me, no matter where they live in the country. Either I'm heading somewhere for a conference, or they're coming to visit Northwestern, which is only about 6 miles from me, and I meet them over there. But it's kind of strange that even though we're remote, you know, most of the time, we somehow get to meet.
That's funny. I've found that to be true myself, even with students that I work with from across the country. When I'm at a conference or traveling to and fro from somewhere, I'm always able to kind of either detour or go through and meet with them somewhere along the route. It works out so well to be able to do that. It's exciting to do that. Selective colleges. Oh my gosh, what a group of colleges that seem so attractive to so many students, yet so far away as well, right?
I mean, you know, so part of it depends on how we define selective colleges, right? So for some people that might be the Ivies, but there are plenty of colleges that have now reached that level of admission, that very low level of admission of acceptance rate, that are not quote Ivies, but they are equally hard to get into.
I've heard some people refer to them as like being Ivy-like.
Yeah, the IVS or Yeah, so for sure. And there's public Ivies and, you know, small little Ivies, they call them. So there are lots of really, like the Swarthmores and the Amherst. There are a lot of amazing colleges. I think what's most important is not to focus on the bumper sticker, not to focus on the brand name, focus on the fit, because they're not all alike. They all have different specialties, and the student has different requirements for what they want. So it's important that, it's also important that you can't have a list of all schools with an under 10% acceptance rate. That could be a disaster. It could be a washout. It's not because the student isn't qualified. It's because 40,000 people are qualified in each applicant pool, and there could be 2,000 acceptances. So
what about that student that, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, Tina, but what about that student that comes to you? Because I'm afraid it happens a lot, and probably more than we actually get to see.
Mhm.
But I hear about it oftentimes with students I work with, especially, and so I'm sure you experience it too, where that student comes and says, has an Ivy League school, a selective college on their list for no other reason than to see if they can get in. Not because they really want to necessarily go there, but there's some type of like personal status that comes along, or the verbal trophy they get to say, hey, I got in, right? How do you handle that with students? Because you're talking about good fit. I talk about good fit all the time. I think it's super important that these colleges that are on these students' lists are schools that fit them well, not just because school. So what do you say to a student about that?
There's a couple of responses I would have to that. One is there's a huge sacrifice in applying to the Ivies or IVS schools. If you want to get in, your best chance is early decision, or as several of them have, restrictive early action. In order to do that, you are giving up doing that at a school that might be a more reasonable fit in terms of getting in. So to take that leap to just see what if, there may be a high opportunity cost in where you're not applying, because as it's true of all schools, it gets harder to get in as you go through the admission cycles. So if you apply earlier, you have your best chance, but you can't apply early decision to multiple schools. And the Ivies, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and Stanford, among others, there are a few other schools, Georgetown and Notre Dame, that have what's called restrictive early action. It works a little differently at Georgetown and Notre Dame. But basically, if you are applying early to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, or Stanford, you cannot apply to any other private school at the same time. So you cannot be applying early decision somewhere else. You cannot be applying early action somewhere else. So you are losing the chance to get those applications in order to see if you could be one of the 4, 5, 6% that can get into one of those schools. Okay. So it's tough, but if you don't do that and you apply regular, the chances are minuscule, probably 2% acceptance in the regular.
Right, so run through those schools one more time, just in case our viewers missed it.
Sure. Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale work on restrictive early action that restricts you from applying at the same time in the same admission cycle to any other private school. You can still apply to state schools for early action, but you cannot be applying for any other privates. So, that's a big sacrifice. That means you're automatically in the regular round for all your other private schools. And then the other two that have some restriction, but not the same restriction, are Georgetown and Notre Dame. And there could be others out there, but they have what's called restrictive early action that means something different. It means you just can't be going early decision somewhere else. In other words, you can't be making a commitment to another school and still be applying to me, because I don't have a chance of getting you. If you actually get into your other school that you applied early decision, I don't even have a chance. So they want to know they at least have a chance.
Right. Now, I've heard something said once, and I'm not sure, the level of truth this might hold, but maybe you could clear this up. But I've heard at one time, and it, it may kind of be one of those myths, right? That colleges like Harvard, for instance, only accept students who are valedictorians.
Well, first of all, I would say that's not true on a couple of levels. Now, does probably about half the class is valedictorians, I'll be honest with you. It's a lot of very high achieving students. However, and who even knows anymore what a valedictorian is because schools don't have rank, right? So class ranks. But there are about 40,000 high schools in this country. And so some of them are big schools, well-known schools, elite schools. Some of them are small schools. Even if they took only valedictorians, they're only taking 2,000 out of that almost 40,000 pool.
Right.
But they're not looking just in that pool. They're looking for students who have the grades and scores as evidence that they could be successful on campus, but they're also looking for something else. And that something else is what would make them special. What experiences have they had that make them unique? What passions have they pursued that make them unique? So they have to have more than the grades and scores. And so just being valedictorian wouldn't be enough. It would be a good thing. It would make them a strong candidate, at least from the grades and scores, but it wouldn't be enough to necessarily get them in. And they generally say they're looking in about the top 10% of a class to get the range of students they're looking for. They want kids who want all majors, who come from all different demographics.
Right.
They want some rural kids and some urban kids and kids who grew up on farms, kids who grew up in all kinds of different situations, and bring a huge amount of diversity to the campus.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always been told that, and learned that campuses, like even the selective colleges, want a well-rounded campus, not necessarily a well-rounded student.
So they do want to, correct, the campus has to be well-rounded. They need kids who want to play football and kids who want to do the newspaper and everything in between, right? But every kid doesn't have to have everything. Right. And they can't, right? They really can't have it. But I hear this a lot from parents. Like I'll be talking to them in an introductory meeting and they'll say, well, we have to do our community service this summer because we don't have that yet. I'm like, that's okay if you don't have that, unless it's a requirement for high school. Not every kid has to stand for the same things. In fact, you have to stand for something different for them to, they're going to have 47,000 applications. They have to pick 2,000 people out of that pool, or maybe 2,200, depending on which Ivy we're talking about. And so if everybody has everything, how would they even do that? They'd have to institute a lottery. So pursue what you're passionate about and go deep on that, versus trying to pursue 20 things that you don't even care about, and trying to look well-rounded. But you need depth. You need depth in whatever you're pursuing.
You mentioned a little bit about grades earlier, of how important it is because of the valedictorian component, right? Or valedictorian-like component.
Just being somewhere near the top of the class.
Somewhere near the top of your class. And here we are in what I call asterisk 2020, right? Where something significant has happened at school that's impacted the grade scale.
Right.
So how do you feel, or how do you see that playing out at the selective schools as they begin to report their grades for consideration?
Yeah, so I mean, every student out there is going to have this slightly wonky second semester junior year if they're applying in the class of 2021. And that's going to be true for whether they're applying to an Ivy or their local state school or anywhere. And colleges know this is coming. They know that some kids may not have finished their testing and may not get a chance to finish their testing. So most of them have gone on record as saying, we will look as favorably as we can at your record, but we're going to be looking at the rigor of the classes. So if you don't have a test score, you kind of point them towards all the other pieces, right? They're going to have to give greater scrutiny to that. They're going to look at the rigor of your classes, and that is school dependent. So they're looking not at how many APs do you have in total, but within your school, what's typical and what do you have? Or, honors or IB classes, whatever it might be. So they're evaluating you within the context of your own school. And I will give you an example this year of a girl who got into Yale. She lives in a rural area. She is, I don't know if she's technically a valedictorian, but she has top grades and scores. She only has a couple of APs because her school does not offer them.
Okay.
Now, what did she do to try to compensate for that? She literally took AP chemistry and AP physics online and did the experiments on her kitchen table, and had literally on her, this was the opening line to her essay.
That's great.
Yeah, because that's what she had to do to get courses that she was interested in, and because she had an interest in sciences in college, so she didn't want to be behind. But this kid went above and beyond all of the opportunities that were presented to her, and she found a way to make it work. And that kind of grit and determination was really important, I think, in why she got admitted. And on top of the fact that she's obviously super smart, would have interviewed really well, wrote a beautiful essay, and all of the above, all the other pieces were there.
Yeah. And that's an important point too, I think, that you've made, Tina, that's significant for parents who are kind of wrestling with, should my son or daughter take like the full load of APs at school, or just the opposite, my school only offers 2.
Yeah.
And will that disqualify them automatically because they're going to apply to an Ivy or a selective college alongside of someone who has 10. And so surely I won't be as competitive against that.
Right. But again, it really comes back to what's the arena in which you're playing.
Correct.
What have you accomplished relative to what has been offered to you? So I had a kid one time who was rejected by Purdue, and they came back and, after the admissions process was over, his counselor called Purdue and asked why. And they said he only took 4 APs and he's in a very competitive school where that's below the average. Mm-hmm. So Purdue engineering, that, he was below what kids in his school take. But I also have had kids with fewer than 4 APs get into harder schools to get into than Purdue, because again, like my girl I used as an example a few minutes ago, that was all she had available to her.
Right.
And so they're really looking within your environment, what you've done. And again, but I also think the girl who went above and beyond what was offered to her made a great statement. Right. I think that shows I didn't just accept what fell into my lap. I went out and found a way to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not number. I mean, I have high schools near me that restrict how many APs a student can take, which is actually a great thing, right? They care more about the sanity of the student. So there's a very, very well-known selective high school here that has, I have kids routinely that will have 14 AP tests. So it's just not hard. They allow them to start in freshman year. And if you're a kid who can handle that kind of pressure and that kind of level of work, then that's what the kids are coming out with, 12 or 14 AP tests, not classes, because some of the courses may be 2 tests. But I have kids at another very elite high school here, can't even take anything until junior year, and they're restricted to 3. So the most those kids will come out with are 6 APs. Those kids do equally well as the kids at the school with the 14 APs.
So that raises a question I have, and I'm kind of thinking of my family's here in the Peachtree City area here in Georgia, and thinking about those who are trying to decide between taking AP classes and taking dual enrollment classes. And how do dual enrollment classes weigh in on the selective college component?
Well, that is an interesting question, because a lot of the Ivies do not work on a credit basis. They work on a number of classes. So I don't really know exactly what they would give you for credit. They may, so I can just tell you my own personal experience, and I don't know exactly how this has changed, but I had 5 APs at the time I was applying, but we're talking like ancient history here. We're talking 35, 40 years ago. But I think I haven't counted it. It's too many years for all my fingers and toes.
We don't have to go there.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a lot in the day. It's not a lot now, but it's a lot in the day, back in the day. But the only use for those was to either waive the language requirement if I had a language AP. Okay. Or to skip an entire year. Now, but it wasn't that I could skip senior year. It wasn't that I could keep going, and if I finished all my requirements, I could just end it at the end of junior year. I had to make the decision as an incoming freshman to immediately become a sophomore. And I have to tell you, I wasn't ready for that. I mean, that's intimidating. And half the class came in with that option, and very few took it. I believe they've now changed it so that it doesn't have to be freshman year, but I don't know, but they don't let you graduate like in 3.5 years or only take 3 classes this semester. It's a full load is 4 classes or more every semester. And so now there are other selective schools that work on credits, and they may give you credit for credit, maybe waive some of your gen ed requirements or something like that.
Right. Well, I want to take just a second to give a shout out to our viewers. And if you have any questions for Tina or myself, or anything that you'd like to comment on, feel free to put that in the comment section just below, and we will definitely read that all, while we're talking, and we'll bring those to light if they're a question that you are curious about. So moving on here, let's talk about another myth here. Now, I've heard this other myth that that all selective colleges are pretty much the same.
Well, I'm gonna have to say not true.
That's why it's a myth.
I mean, it is a myth, but what they do have in common, of course, is they're all good. They're all hard to get into, and they're all rigorous once you get there. So, but the reason I say myth is because let's just keep it to the Ivies for a moment. There are 8 Ivies. If a student were to say to me, I'm interested in business, that's what I want to study, only 2 of them offer an undergrad business degree.
Okay.
If they want engineering, there are certain ones that would be considered better at engineering than others. Many of them, you enroll in the college. You don't have to declare a specific college within the university, and you don't have to declare a major. You're just enrolling, and you can pick whatever you want afterwards. Others, you have to choose a school. So for example, at Cornell or at Penn, they have multiple colleges within the university, and you have to pick one, and that's what you get admitted to.
Right.
Harvard, Princeton, Yale, you're just getting into Yale College, Harvard College, and you go there and you can decide to major in whatever you want to major in. And if we go even beyond that, similarly, some will make you apply to a school and some will just be open, sort of that open enrollment concept. They're in very different locations. A lot of them are urban. Some of them are very rural, like Cornell, like Dartmouth. Some are bigger than others. So you've got Dartmouth as the smallest, and you've got Cornell with 14,000 undergrads, which is very big. I mean, most of them are more like 6,000 to 7,000 undergrads. Right. So, they look alike in the fact that they have red brick and they were many founded around the same time. But did you know, I don't know if most of your viewers would know this, that the Ivy League has nothing to do with the caliber of the schools. It was a sports league initially. Yeah, it was founded purely as an athletic league. And so people, have come to equate it with good schools, but, it really didn't originally mean that at all. Right. They, of course, are all good schools and all very hard to get into. But, again, interesting, Cornell is part state school. It's half Ivy and half state school. And so there are certain colleges within Cornell, like an agricultural college, that are meant to support, the industry and, professions around the area. What else? There are most have graduate schools, not all have graduate schools. Okay. So that could play into into it. Penn has, for whatever reason, Penn has a nursing program. I don't know that I don't think any of the others have a nursing program. So, certainly as we broaden out beyond the Ivies, you might start to find that. But so they have different curriculums. They have different types of campuses. They have, they attract different students geographically. So there are lots of differences.
Well, it sounds, obviously it sounds like, and by and far it's true. They each have their own personality.
They do.
And they should only be applied to by certain individuals who would be good fit there, right? That
are a fit there, right. There's a reason for every school's existence. They're better at certain things. Right. They have a famous program that another college may not have. They have a different vibe.
Yeah, different culture.
Yeah, so the student's job is really to figure out where that fit is.
Right. And so that kind of leads.
And our job is to help them to figure that out.
Yeah, we help them do that, absolutely. That kind of leads me to the next myth that seems to be rather popular, and that is that the more selective schools I apply to, the more likely I'll get into one.
Well, right? That's not really how statistics work.
Like eventually, if I throw all the darts at the dartboard, one of them will surely land in the
right. So that logic would tell me if there's an average of 6% acceptance rate, I apply to 15 schools and I'm guaranteed one of them.
Right.
Doesn't work that way. You could get 0, you could get 3. I have, every year it makes the news when somebody gets into all of the Ivies.
Right.
It's almost always a student who is, has a story, maybe an immigration story, maybe a poverty story. Most of my kids don't even apply to all of them, so I couldn't tell you if any would get in. But those who have applied to a lot of them, it's a mixture. It's some in, some no, some wait lists. It's a variety. So each one is an independent event. So that's why I say adding more of them is not really giving you, it's not like getting more lottery tickets to the same lottery. You're getting a lottery ticket to different lotteries, and you still only have one in each lottery.
Right. Right. And you mentioned something there that, those who have applied to many and gotten into many at once that always tend to show up in the news, they have a story. They have a very unique story
They have a hook, as we call it.
Yeah, there's something there that has really allowed them to surface to the top. Now, granted, their story is probably this phenomenal story, but it's important for us to note that all of us have a story. And part of that which sets us apart is telling that story. And so as we apply to the selective schools, as we apply to really any of the schools, any colleges, university, when we're writing our essays, we're telling our story. And we've got to find the best version of that story to tell and the best way to communicate that story. I was on a Zoom call this morning, right, with University of Georgia, and they were talking about how, if they read one more missions trip story,
Yeah,
right, and so
or
summer camp story, right, and that is so important to take note of, because that just kind of goes on top of the desk with all the other applicants that are typical, right? And it doesn't really set them apart. And we're talking about a selective list of colleges and universities that admit highly selectively. And so how then do you set yourself apart for that? How would you answer that question? How would you set yourself apart?
So it's tough, right? Because kids, I can tell you over and over, tell me there's nothing unique about me. I'm smart and I work hard, and there's nothing unique about me. Right. So what I'm looking for is that uniqueness when we sit down to talk about what their essays could be about, their main essay on the Common App, even some supplemental ones. What I do is I do an in-depth interview process that kind of takes, my former career was in marketing before I switched over to full-time college consulting. And I use some marketing research techniques to elicit like what their real story is. So, and it's often not one story, but it's multiple stories that I hear that add up to something else. So what I do is I have a 5-page, I think it is, but worksheet that I make notes on. I have questions laid out and I make notes on as we go through. And I'm using certain symbols and whatnot to kind of mark what I found, what I heard that was interesting. So I'm not worrying about the Common App questions, the prompts, doesn't matter. Any story can find one of the prompts to fit into. So don't care about those. We're not answering a question, we're telling a life story. And I'm looking for those little uniquenesses in how they think, what they've experienced, what they're passionate about. And the stories can be more simple than most people think. So, right, most kids start off with, I don't have a tragedy, so I don't really have a good story. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you don't have a tragedy. A, we don't want you to have one, and B, you don't want to go to the college where every kid has had a tragedy. Like that might not be the most fun campus to be on. So I'm not looking for a tragedy. Some kids have a tragic story or a difficult background. Of course, we deal with that sensitively. But so let me give you some examples just from this year's class, what they wrote about. And I'm going to guess you're not going to think these sound that special. So it's not in the theme, it's in how that student brings that story to life.
It's the delivery.
Yeah. So one of my girls who's going to go to MIT, her essay was about how she sees the world in patterns. That's how she's predisposed, and she opened the story with a game that's a pattern game. I forget what it's called. And that, how she beats her family at this all the time. And so, it takes work to get to that story, right? To figure out that's what she should write about.
Yeah.
The girl I mentioned who's going to Yale, she wrote about her unique circumstances growing up and how she's, taken classes at her kitchen table, that kind of thing. Let's see. I have a student who's going to Brown, and he wrote about how he wants to change the world through computer science and what he's done already to date. Now, normally we want the essay to be who you are, not what you've done, because what you've done will be in the application elsewhere, the activities list. So he wasn't retelling or giving a list of what he's done. He was really showing what drives him, what makes him tick, how he got into what he got into, and why he's so passionate about it. So that was the difference there. Let's see. Another girl who's going to Columbia wrote about how she grew up. She was born here, but her parents were born in Italy. And they came over to the United States just like a year or two before she was born. And she wrote about how even though she's a native English speaker, she speaks Italian at home. And there are glitches in her English. And she discovered, sometimes it's embarrassing. And she discovered, like, in Italian, to say the word salmon would be salmone. So she thought if it's salmone, it's probably salmon. And so she just pronounced it salmon. And she was at a restaurant with some friends and ordered salmon. And they all looked at her like, what? Like, girlfriend, don't you know how to say that word? But that was kind of her story,
Right.
because I had another girl who wrote about how she didn't like sushi the first time she tried it, but how she gave it a chance. And then it became her favorite food. So the whole essay wasn't about sushi. The essay became how she's the kid who gives things second chances. And she, transitioned to other things that she had given second chances to.
That's a good word.
Yeah. So often, I would tell you that I think essays take one of two forms. You either have a singular story that reveals a lot about you through telling that singular story, or you have a singular trait that you want to communicate, like seeing the world in patterns or giving things second chances, that is revealed through multiple anecdotes.
Right.
And there's a million different varieties within that, but those are kind of like the two structures that I see that get to these high quality essays.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with it.
Yeah, I had another boy who's going to University of Chicago. He wrote about how he hated his summer job at this grocery store working in the bakery. And he would wear his baseball hat like over his face because he didn't want his friends to see him. He was embarrassed, and how he saw his coworker like just right out there and like greeting everybody. And he just why isn't she embarrassed to be working at the grocery store like I am? And he started to learn how wrong his thinking was. And he turned that around, and he again then talks about how he learned leadership that he didn't realize he learned. And he resented that his father made him take this job when he wanted to go to like some high priced, summer trip or internship or something. And he kind of came to realize that his father knew what he was doing when he told him to take that job. And so anyway, really great essay. You see a lot of personality in all of these essays. And so the trick is, by the end of that essay, can I describe that kid in a couple of sentences? They're the kid who what? What do they stand for? How do I end that sentence? Right. And yeah. And, some come to me, they already have an idea that's interesting, and we go through the process anyway. And sometimes we wind up back at that idea. Sometimes we've added to the idea through new things we've discovered. And sometimes we come out with something completely different.
Right.
And,
one of the other things that I think about when it comes to essay is, of course, who writes the essay. And we always know that it's super important that the student themselves are the ones that are authoring that work from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I have a price. I'm only kidding.
That's good. But yeah. You got to be careful with that, right? Because
well, that's the unfortunate disgrace that has been brought upon the industry by certain scandals. Yeah, it is really important. And this is the interesting thing that I always have to help parents understand. We are not seeking perfection. We're seeking authenticity.
That's awesome.
I had a mother ask me this year, she goes, are you going to correct the grammatical mistakes? And I'm like, well, I don't know what grammatical mistakes are in there, but she was referring to things like who versus whom, and ending a sentence in a preposition. And I said, you know what? I'm a grammar purist and I see those things, but I also know that no 17-year-old would write the way an adult would write, and it has to be authentic to them. So I am pushing that student to be the best, to get the best essay they can get, but not every essay is perfect. I mean, I certainly wouldn't let them leave an obvious grammatical, typo or something. But, I once had a kid who wrote an essay, and this was when this expression was first coming in, and he said something about, I really crushed it. And I wasn't cool enough to understand that at the time. So I said, I get that this is some teenage expression, but I don't really know if it means you did well or you did badly. The expression doesn't sound good. So I said, I don't know, that's slang. But in the context of the essay he was writing, it worked. Mm. And so I suggested he might want to tone it down. And he said, I don't want to. And I went with it. And, he went to UCLA. So all was good. It worked. It worked for a high caliber admission. So, sometimes I don't know, because I don't let them use real street language. They shouldn't write this like it's a very casual thing. It can be funny, it can have personality, but it shouldn't be something you scribble out in an hour. Right. It takes time to get a good essay. It goes through lots of maturation, and kids get better at writing as time goes on.
Right. And, and that's why it's so important that during the summer between junior and senior year, you might want to take a few moments to kind of just jot down some ideas, or maybe even write that rough draft, as literally rough as it might look, just to kind of get the ball rolling and get your mind thinking.
Yeah. I tell them to don't limit themselves to the words. The limit on the main Common App essay, as you know, is 650 words. It takes 800 words or 1,000 words to get us to the 650 best words. Yeah. So let your mind go, write the story. Now, if you give me 3,000 words, I don't know what I can do with that. But don't worry about the word count. Get the story out, because I can help you pick which parts of the story seem the most relevant and the least relevant, and talk about how we could restructure things. But if I don't know the story, even though we would have talked and decided on this topic, I don't know the details. I don't know them that well. I need them to give me details, and then we can work together and I love it when kids push back. I love it when kids don't just say to me, or think, if Tina said it, it must be right. You know what? It's not, they know their story. They know the direction they want to take their story, and that may be different than the direction I envision. I can share my direction as a suggestion, and if they like it, they can change their essay in that direction. But, that's their decision. I want them to own it. I really ask them to own it, and I ask parents to not help edit it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key part right there.
Yeah. I also tell them, some kids, as you know, you've probably had this, they go back to school and they either start showing their friends or their teachers, and they get 5 opinions. Oh. We could edit indefinitely. Yeah. You could always find another opinion. And that just adds confusion to the mix. Yeah. So I ask them to try to not do that. It's not to say that those people might not have good impact or good input, but it probably doesn't matter to the story. It's, you could wordsmith forever. They're reading the entire application in somewhere between 8 and 15 minutes. So the best thing is to get a story that pops off the page. Right. And, little details aren't going to matter, but get a story that makes them go, wow, makes them have an emotional reaction. If you can make them laugh, if you can make them cry, I can tell you, I'm sure you've seen this, I can read a lot of essays, and even though they're all different topics, they sound the same. Oh. And so you're looking for the ones that don't sound the same. Which one really breaks through? Yeah. And again, at the end of it, they're trying to understand who that kid is, almost like if they had an interview with the kid. Yeah. And so, we want that authenticity. We want it to be high caliber, high quality writing, because it should be if they're applying to a very selective school. But more important is what they're saying than how they write it.
So what would you say to the student who says, or maybe even the parent who says, look, Tina, I went to a selective school or an Ivy League school myself, and my son or daughter is going to apply to that school as well. And therefore, we're pretty confident Junior's going to get in because we went there.
Right. So my question back to them is, which building has your name on it?
Right.
So just going to a school and having 1 point of legacy may not carry that much weight. You know, having generations of legacy, having large donations, having membership, or not membership, but positions on various boards, trustees of universities, things like that, that can truly have some weight. But junior has to want that school enough to commit to it as an early decision applicant or a restrictive early action applicant if they want that legacy to count. So if they don't do it early, that clearly tells the school they went somewhere else early and they are now using this as their backup. So your legacy, there's varying degrees of it. So that's the important takeaway, varying degrees. And then you have to use the legacy appropriately in terms of usually means going early in the early round.
Right.
So, and at some schools, so when I was on the Harvard admissions committee, or again, as an alumna representative, they would always tell us it's like a fourth or fifth tiebreaker. In other words, if you don't have the credentials, again, you better have a building mate after you to get past that, right? I mean, there are some people on this VIP list who get past that with enough donations. That's a very small number of people.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, if you have all the credentials and they're struggling between two candidates, one who has legacy and one who does not, then you may get the nod.
Yeah.
But again, it's not a replacement for having the credentials.
Yeah. Yeah. Legacy is not always a true ticket to.
Yeah, all legacy is not created equal, and not all schools count legacy in the same way. In fact, since the big Harvard lawsuit that was resolved, some schools have discontinued legacy as a criteria at all. So they're not very transparent, or if they are, I haven't seen exactly which ones. I want to say Emory has stopped it. But you know, so that gave more visibility to the whole idea of these people who may in some ways bypass the standard credentials, and that's starting to, you know, break down now.
Yeah, it's just it's an interesting journey. You know, you and I have been on several road trips, and our viewers may not know this, but it's pretty,
hours in the car, hours.
It's hours in the car. And going from college to college, visiting universities, and getting to know the campuses, and what takes place on their campuses. We've seen pretty exciting campuses, and I still remember going to Northeastern there in Chicago. Northwestern in Chicago, and seeing all the wonderful things that right there on the lake, and my first experience on the edge of that body of water, which was pretty exciting. And but then we kind of drove into Iowa and visited quite a few colleges during that trip. You know, and there's such value in campus visits, even as consultants like ourselves, but even more so for students, right, and parents. Now we're in kind of a weird time, in 2020, where we can't actually get in a car and drive there.
Well, we could, but there'll be nothing to see when we get there. There'll be no students. There'll be no people. No buildings will be open.
We might be able to go see what an empty parking lot looks like.
We could take pictures of the signs as you might want to share as something that you really enjoy doing on road trips.
That's right. So there might be some interesting moments if you were able to like drive through the campus.
Right.
You won't be able to conclude much by that.
Right.
So what would be some ways in which you would advise your families to get to know some of these colleges that they're considering?
Sure. So first of all, I actually, even in better times when one is able to go wherever they want to go, I actually say before the parents book a plane ticket, make the student do some research to make sure it's even a school they're interested in. So what is that research? You know, understand the basics of it, the size, where it's located, the town it's in, you know, if it's rural or urban, et cetera. But also, right now, almost all colleges are offering virtual info sessions. So the same info session you would get if you went there and checked into the admissions office, they're doing online. Some are doing them live, some have pre-recorded them so you can watch them anytime. So that's an easy one. That's an easy thing to do. Also, almost every college out there also has a video of the campus. They take different forms. Some of them are, I don't know what you'd call it, animated videos. Some of them are live, footage. There are websites that devote themselves to doing videos of campuses and interviewing students, like universitytv.com. So there are lots of different places where you can watch a video of the campus. That's a great thing to do as well. Take a look at the college website. If you have an interest in a particular major, so I'll use communications as an example. A lot of colleges have a school of communications. Not all communications is created equal. In some schools that equals journalism, in some schools that equals filmmaking, in some schools that equals advertising, in some it's all of those things. So if you have a specific interest, make sure they have not just the title of the major, but that this curriculum is what you are looking for.
Right.
So you can save a lot of money that way, because I've had families report back to me. They literally got out of the car, parked the car, got out and said nope, and walked and didn't even do the tour or the info session. That could have been avoided. Yeah, I know. I would scream at my kid and make them take the tour. I would make, after spending that money, I would make them walk around.
The homework's important, and to dig down a little deeper on the website to find the academic program you're interested in.
Yeah.
Look at the professors that are in that program. What are they teaching? Where did they study?
Yep.
What kind of classes are they doing? What kind of reviews do the students have on them?
Is a thesis required? If you want to do research, what kind of undergraduate research is there? If you want to go to med school, do they have what are called what are they called? Not early admission, early access medical, like the direct med program, but not when you start off as a freshman, but after sophomore year, where you can apply to go to the med school of that particular university. So Tulane has that. There's a variety of schools that have that. If that's something you want, you have to find the schools that have that. I mean, that's where our expertise can come into play. But people can find that themselves as well if they're not using a consultant. So there's just so much you can do, and seeing campuses is great. But one piece of advice that I often give people is we need to start with some parameters to narrow down over 2,000 four-year colleges. There are like over 4,000 schools, including all public and private and nonprofit and for-profit and all that. But if we focus just on four-year private and public colleges, over 2,000, how are you going to decide on 10 or 12 to put on your list? Use some local colleges as proxies if you have it. So if in your area, you may never go to Georgia Tech or Emory, but go look at them and see what you like and what you don't like, because the sooner you start identifying factors, find a small school, a medium-sized school, go look at the big state schools, look at some that are not in urban areas, some that are in urban areas, and get a feel for your parameters, which will continue to develop as you see more schools. But sometimes what kids think they want is not what they wind up wanting in the end. So they think, I want big state or just big in general, because that'll allow me more choices, I'll make more friends. And then they see something smaller and realize, wow, that could be kind of nice to be on a residential campus. That could be kind of nice to not have grad students teaching me and to only have professors teaching me.
Right.
So there are a lot of amazing schools out there. And so we have to start narrowing them down by the parameters that the student decides are important to them. I mean, I live in Illinois. We're Big Ten territory here. Lots of kids interested in big state, rah, want to be at football games. So I often present to them a school on their list that is not that, just to see if there's any traction there.
Yeah,
open their minds.
That's one of the things I enjoy doing most, is like putting schools on the students' list that they've never heard of before, have no idea anything about. In fact, sometimes that has actually turned even more positive, because now they're actually going to that school.
Right.
Because they didn't know anything about it, didn't even know it existed. And that's the value of our work, and in being able to travel all over the country and visiting so many different campuses and learning about the different colleges and universities that aren't, maybe they're not your most popular labels. They may not even be your selective schools, but they've got some really cool programs, and they're doing some really amazing
Yeah.
things.
I have a great story that pertains to that.
Yeah.
So I had a student a few years ago, a female student, and most of my students start off with not smaller than my high school, not University of Illinois. So those are their parameters going in. I tell them, I predict it for them and tell them, and also not a women's college. That's where they all are initially. But anyway, she thought the bigger the better. And her favorite dream school was UCLA. She had visited UCLA. She was just in love with UCLA. So she got into UCLA. She went to UCLA. By Christmas, she was telling me this isn't the right fit for me.
Uh-oh.
And the reason, so she said, I'm having a good time. I met good people. I have a good roommate. There's nothing missing except it's such a big place. I constantly have fear I'm missing something. I have this constant sense of there are 52,000 activities going on, and I have to figure out what they are and what I should be at. And it's just exhausting and overwhelming for her. And that was complicated by the fact that she thought she wanted to major in environmental sciences and could not even get the intro class till her sophomore year. So she's like, I don't see how I can even graduate now if I can't even get the intro class. I may or may not really like the field. I just think I like it. And so she transferred. You know where she transferred to?
Where's that?
Colorado College. 1,500 students or 17, very small, the complete antithesis of UCLA.
Totally.
And loves it. And for those who don't know Colorado College, it's in Colorado Springs, and they are one of only two schools that use the block program, which is one course at a time. So you take one course, 3.5 weeks. It's a very selective school to get into, very hard, but not a household name. A lot of people might not know it. Or they might think they know it because it sounds like one of the state schools or something, but very selective, and she is loving it. So I hate the fact that she had to go through a bad experience to get to the good experience, but her dream had to change. She got what she wanted. It just wasn't really what she should have wanted.
Right.
Yeah. So she had to learn that, but she's having a great experience now.
My gosh, this has been so much fun.
Is it over?
No, well, it's not quite. I mean, we got a few minutes, but we're kind of coming into like the checkered flag here soon.
Oh no.
I know, it's sad. Like we're having a lot of
fun. Well, do the people want to stick with us?
You don't want to leave them now.
I don't want to beg, but I'm not above it.
Well, I do want to tell our viewers that pretty excited that our College Journey Conversations are going to continue every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. We have quite the lineup coming up all the way through the middle of July so far. We've got topics like, to name only a few, gap year experiences, which are going to be pretty exciting. Essays, college essays, and what to expect on them. We're going to be talking about military academies and leadership development. That one's going to be really exciting. Next week is going to be amazing. We're going to be talking about student athletes, and we're actually going to have a college head coach with us, along with some experts to help us out in that one. We're going to talk about colleges that change lives here upcoming. So there's a whole host of topics that are coming up that are going to serve many inquisitive people that are joining us every Wednesday night. So we're pretty excited. I just want to kind of put that little plug in there. Tina, how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to?
Well, so if you Google me, you will find me on various sites, but it's Tranfaglia. You can see the spelling on my little image here, or you can contact me by email at tina@collegeknowledgellc.com.
Excellent. That's awesome. Well, they can always contact me, and I can pass their information on to you if they wanted me to do that. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Oh, thank you.
The thing about Capstone Educational Consultants and College Knowledge Admissions Consultants is we're very close friends, and we have each other's phone number and email contact, and we can reach out to each other as much as we want if there's questions that each of our clients have that maybe we just need an extra mind to kind of problem solve with, or maybe we're looking for a college and we want to brainstorm off of each other. And so that's part of the value that comes with the network that you and I are a part of.
Yeah. I love to brainstorm college lists with somebody because we all have different experiences in what we've seen and what we're familiar with. And I think that that creates better lists.
Yeah, it does. And so that's pretty exciting. Well, in the end, we know it's not just getting into the toughest school possible, right?
No, it should be the right school with the right programs, the right fit for students.
Exactly. And that's where.
Here's another thing, though. A lot of the Ivies are in the Northeast. I'm getting a lot more interest in warmer climates lately because I got kids in the snow zone.
Well, listen, there's a whole bunch of people listening right now down here that we get that. We understand this.
Maybe they want some snow.
Yeah, right. Well, you can have your snow, right? We love our warm weather and we love the sun.
Well, the world has suddenly discovered that you don't have to live in a cold climate all the time. So there's a lot of interest in Southern schools too.
That's right. Good stuff. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And say that again.
I said thank you, everyone, for watching.
Oh yes, we're so excited to have you, Tina, and we're gonna have you back. Don't worry. I think.
Okay, there was a lot of those topics I could see myself having an opinion on.
I got you. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Tina, for joining us.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good evening. Bye-bye.